It's going to be interesting the day that finally comes when people from other countries that we have been talking down to and about as Americans for decades are finally the ones referring to us as a developing nation, because we're in such dire straits because we've spent all the money.
Emerging market. Emerging market sounds much nicer than developing nation, though. We're emerging. We're blooming. Happy spring.
Except there's a bunch of countries that have been in the emerging markets category longer than I've been in this business, which is 15 years. And so how long does emerging count as emerging before you just never emerged and we should stop talking about it?
I mean, how long was Kiss the hottest band in the world? You can hang on to that for a while.
Yeah, but how long were they up and coming? See, that's the category that would matter. Like, you know, the
play.
Billboard Awards and VMAs and everything has like hot new artists, up and coming artists. You can't get that 2 years in a row. You either up and coming or you up and came. Like, you can't just be. So that's more what I mean.
Can't be a contender for that long. Anyway, a lot has happened since our last market show. We recorded the day before we really started this hot war in Iran. How have you been taking it in, Malcolm? How are you doing?
I am doing my best to not do anything as it relates to this war right now. And I mean, specific to the markets. I mean, otherwise, what else can I do? Go fill up my tank now while it's 350, go into 5. Like every time I've had a conversation, either with clients, because we're in the middle of our client review season. So I'm having this conversation like 3 or 4 times a day, literally, or even on TV. My stance is the same. Like we have to hold here. We have to wait and see what actually comes to fruition versus the 5 or 6 different announcements that are being made that go in a bunch of different directions, seemingly every single day from this administration. With the exception that I think if we, at the end of this month, are still embroiled in this whole thing to the extent that we are now, like there's contemplation of U.S. boots on the ground. There's contemplation of, can we successfully and safely navigate the Strait of Hormuz and actually get oil tankers through there, or are they always in imminent danger if they decide to send a boat through there? If that lasts through the end of this month, I think we're talking a different talk. I think at that point, now U.S. companies going into earnings have no choice but to give guidance that includes, here's what happens if oil prices stay elevated. Because that's an entire month of oil at 80 or 100 or 120 a barrel.
Yeah, I guess now's a good time to say that I do have bone spurs. I can't, and I'm working on a podcast. I can't be boots on the ground for this. I got a lot going. I got a lot going on. I can't. I
think 30 is the age cutoff for the draft anyway, if I remember right.
Oh, fingers crossed, man.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. I'm nobody wants me. I'm old and I can't see, so like I'm not getting drafted anywhere. But I think 30.
I'm being sarcastic, but I think you made an important point that I want to highlight, which is now is not a great time to make big investing decisions based on a hot war that you don't know the timeline of. There is a version of this, and to be clear, what I'm about to tell you are different scenarios. I actually don't have a strong opinion. Like, I don't know. I'm bad at guessing what's going to happen in the Middle East, but there is a version of this. So is
the president, apparently.
There's a version of this that is the Rick and Morty quick 20-minute adventure, in and out. We declare victory on something, and then we're quickly moving back. There's also a version of this, and that is kind of the, I would say that's the version that I have heard some of, and there's also an incentive to make that version happen. There's also a version of this where it's another extended Middle Eastern campaign where we thought things were going really well at the start, and then it takes a significantly longer period of time than we expect.
Has the quick in and out window not closed though?
I don't know.
It's been
I hope so, man.
More than 2 weeks at this point, right? Or 2 weeks exactly. So I think the quick in and out conversation is done at this point.
The middle in and out, middle, maybe an Airbnb more than a lease.
We're lingering, and we're going to see who shows up is kind of weird. Because you also have to consider, like, when you decide to attack one country in partnership with another country, it's not completely up to you. Like, Israel has their own opinions and ideas and plans related to this thing. And so since you got into this together, just because you want to go home doesn't necessarily mean your ride is ready to go.
Yeah, we have Lebanon opened up. That's going on. We should do the intro of the show. There are many more things, economic consequences that I'm watching. This is more of going to be a like watching the economy sort of part of the show. And then we will talk about individual companies, what's going on with Robinhood and the Ticketmaster settlement. I know both of us have opinions on that. So let's get into it. So Malcolm, it's difficult to organize thoughts on this war when things are happening so quickly and numbers change so often. There was an estimate that the daily cost of the first, few days of the war was close to 900 million, excuse me. Then we find out it's twice that, and really it may be more than that once you account the long-term costs of going to war, when you pay veterans benefits and Social Security disability and the Pentagon budget, which may go up. So the economic consequences are extraordinarily difficult to quantify, other than to say it is a lot. And I have some reporting on this coming out on the Indicator from Planet Money tomorrow, so make sure you tune into that. But in terms of things that I am watching, number one is the cost. The other thing I've been thinking about is something we've been talking about on the show, and I know you have an opinion on, which is the Sell America trade. Fareed Zakaria has been talking on CNN about how we're moving from a rules-based system to one where might makes right. And that's been going on for a while. I wonder if this situation in Iran sort of accelerates that, where we're getting into a Middle Eastern campaign and we're not doing the courtesy of bringing other nations into it or really talking to them about it. We're just kind of going in as a co-branded US-Israel war.
Well, even so, like, even if you are able to be successful in your campaign, it forces you to take your eye off of a lot of other things. And it also alienates other people and other places that might have been interested in being aligned with you on something else. So if you just think about the fact that we had a tariff war going on once upon a time, and up until the Supreme Court ruling that basically said those tariffs were illegal, 10% is your maximum threshold, we were focused there. And that was the war that was being fought on multiple fronts by one country and trying to navigate that hasn't completely gone away. And the ill will that you created when you decided to raise tariffs to 100%, on certain countries and everything else, they were just now coming to terms with their feelings around that. Then you start firing missiles at possibly their friend and neighbor in some instances, and that kind of changes things. So I say all that to say, like, it's just created an environment where we already had a branding issue that was creating the Sell America trade in the first place. And this is one more thing that adds to that branding issue that makes people around the world less excited when they see the red, white, and blue.
So I don't know how many friends Iran had. It was largely seen by many Gulf countries as a destabilizing force.
Yes.
Its alliances seem to be with China and Russia, which already weren't really our friends. But with that, I think I've heard the perspective that, this has been, Iran has never been, Iran long time ago was kind of friendly with the US. Lately, it has been more, death to America chants, and they've been behind proxy wars. However, and the thought is that if you can take out the regime, you're actually stabilizing the Middle East a little bit because you're removing a destabilizing force. I don't know if that is continued to be believed among the other Gulf nations as, the US launches these missiles where they're like, yeah, but you also started a hot war now. And we're seeing, oil tankers getting blown up, oil fields getting messed with, and the global energy markets having real problems because a lot of other nations do not have the amount of a strategic oil reserve in terms of like days supply that the United States has.
Nor do they have the capital to withstand a doubling of the price per barrel overnight, right? So forget the reserves to go and tap to be able to bring oil back online and make sure prices don't go crazy. They also don't have resources to be able to say we can withstand whatever the price is just to keep our infrastructure in place and running. And that's dangerous too.
One other effect I'm watching before I get to a big one, or the big one, is Gulf investment commitments. UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar have about $3 trillion worth of US investment commitments. That is, I think a lot of that is in artificial intelligence, and some of that is building on-site data centers within their own nations. Some of that is rebuilding Gaza. Some of that is a Disneyland in the United Arab Emirates. And now I wonder if those nations see those commitments and say, you know what, we actually can't do that. We need to rebuild toward national defense. And that could, if they do that, this is the anxiety spiral, if they do that, maybe that creates a domino effect on the AI trade as some of the investors start pulling their dollars out of the development.
Well, the AI trade was intended to be a US dominated trade anyway, right? We have to put data centers in other places around the world because the lag in getting the data. The lag in getting the data from point A to point B can be so long that it makes someone not use a certain tool. And that's what we're trying to guard against. So putting data centers in Saudi Arabia, for example, or around the UAE makes sense so that as the large language model is returning its answer, it doesn't have as far to travel. So not as much time between me making the query and me getting an answer. But it's still being put there by Amazon, by Google, by Microsoft, the companies that are owning and investing in and running Anthropic and OpenAI and on and on. And so I don't know that scares me as an American investor so much because I want the US to be the country that owns and controls as much of the AI trade as possible. From a more practical sense, though, it does help make sure that other countries continue to lag, which isn't necessarily great. Because if something does go wrong, it sets them back for a very meaningful period of time.
All right, I'm going to do an unfair thought exercise, and I don't have a good answer to this. It's okay if the answer is no. What is a less risky investment? What is a more risk-free investment? A 30-year US Treasury or a I would even say, we can even say 30, a 30-year secured bond, 30 Freudian slip, 30-year secure bond from Amazon.
Interesting.
The fact that you have to think about it is interesting as well.
Yeah. I would say a 30-year secure bond from Amazon. And the reason I say that is because Amazon is going to continue to increase how much its Prime subscribers have to pay to get access to the 2-day shipping and all the goodies that Amazon has conditioned us to believe we need in our lives. I am not convinced that the US government is going to do anything to help increase its top line revenue, which is the IRS. The IRS is going in the wrong direction. So our enforcement on the people who owe the biggest chunks of change to the US government is going down, which means that the stability of their paying the interest on that 30-year bond is less attractive to me than Amazon, who has all the pricing power in the world and flexes it with no problems.
If you have an opinion on that, Spotify comments are a great place to give your take. It's something that I don't want to do the thing that other financial shows where I pretend I'm an expert in everything and have a clean take on everything. That's how, shout out to friend of the show, Jim Cramer, where you can get in a little bit of trouble for saying that we need to treat this like a Vietnam situation, then everyone's attacking him. Look, I don't know. I'm not great at predicting Middle East stuff, but if you have an answer to that, it's a curious question because in the world of finance, a U.S. Treasury is the risk-free rate, but this is a case where the name of the show comes into play. This time may be different. There are also.
I saw the show where he made that parallel to the Vietnam War. I didn't realize he was getting backlash for that. It didn't stand out to me as odd.
people were saying that like he got community noted, basically being like, yeah, but then we got into a long engagement and the US lost the Vietnam War. So it's me being kind of mean about internet stuff, which I shouldn't be. I need to be nicer. This whole thing bums me out. I'm looking at this like, do we need this war? Does it serve American interests? A couple perspectives I've heard on this that I will offer to you, because I'm doing reporting on it, I'm trying to be somewhat neutral and offering you both takes. One is that the daily cost of this campaign may go down as the US has quickly achieved air superiority. The other thing I've heard is that the way we fund wars doesn't particularly matter between taxation and debt, where in pre-9/11 wars, there was some debt spending on the Vietnam War to pay for it. But in basically every war between the Revolutionary War and 9/11, those wars were funded with a mixture of tax increases and non-war budget cuts. So the two perspectives on this are that, number one, higher taxes also have an effective future cost as deficit spending. Therefore, it all comes out in the wash. The second perspective is that you really need to take into account the interest payments you pay for when you take out debt to fund a war. And you may even pay even more for a war because people are less connected in the current state to the cost of it when they're not seeing current spending cuts and additional taxes to their from the IRS.
I definitely don't want to see war bonds in my portfolio. Like, forget the 30-year treasury example you just gave me.
Sure.
I don't want to see war bonds as part of my fixed income portion of my portfolio. I don't know what position those hold in terms of who gets paid what first, but that feels like the very last thing on the list for the U.S. government to pay if it has some sort of a cash crunch, like we're talking about with the deficit having to someday be paid back.
To be clear, I'm saying that there were additional taxes on Americans, not just war bonds. It was, we're going to raise your everyday taxes at the same time, and we're going to cut a lot of like discretionary spending.
Yeah, you're talking post 9/11.
Yeah,
I'm saying I would prefer that way
adding it to the
because
deficit.
I don't want war bonds, period. So I would prefer that they figure out a way to finagle it into the annual budget instead of trying to issue debt to the U.S. taxpayer to buy into like I-bonds that had everybody going crazy over the increased interest rates that you could get for $10,000 worth of deposits. And like, I don't want to see that anymore was my point.
One of the last things I want to say on this, because we've spent a good bit of time on it, something I'm trying to practice with this is getting a diverse sources of information. I think that this is one of those cases when there's a lot of chaos. It's important to listen to people you agree with and don't agree with. Something I will blow past and talk about on a later show is that when I was 19 years old, I accidentally worked for a Russian propaganda TV station in Tel Aviv for a summer for RT. I did some stories for RT accidentally.
RT got you?
I signed up for what turned out to be kind of a shell corp. And anyway, it was one of those things where I did an internship, and it was one of those things, I need to stop saying one of those things. I saw how propaganda can work in both directions. So now I'm kind of hypersensitive to it. And so the one thing I try to practice is actively seeking out opinions from people I know I disagree with to figure out how I think about this generally.
I shouldn't be like laughing about it, but I remember I think it was John Oliver did a whole thing on how they duped like some really big name YouTubers at the time and had them thinking that they were working for a reputable organization. So it was just funny when you said that legitimately like the story had some teeth to it.
Yeah, I remember I'll do another internship story from 2017. When I interviewed for an internship at CNBC, one of the reasons I got the internship was because I had Russia Today on my resume. So I came in thinking like, oh, they like me because I've got good grades at Ohio State and I'm studying finance and I have this mixture of media and finance going on. And I get to the interview, and one of the things that kind of slips, they're like, the real reason we brought you here is because we thought it was odd that you worked for a Russian news source when you were 19. And I had to explain that it happened by act. They just wanted to hear the story. I ended up getting the internship, so
Okay.
it unlocked doors in a interesting way. If I start going down that rabbit hole, we've got at least 20 minutes of content, and I want to talk about Robinhood.
But that story confirms one of my strongly held theories about life overall, which is that the people who have the most success throughout their life on all fronts are the people who figure out a way to be interesting. And so them wanting to bring you in for a conversation just to hear more about this thing that you somehow found yourself wrapped up in is like, we just want to talk to you because you're interesting. And I think that's the case for just about everything you'll ever do in life, whether it's like romantic relationships, professional opportunities, like anything you'll ever want to do. Just being interesting gets you the opportunity.
Learning how to tell a story and also knowing when to shut up. I've had to learn more of the latter than the former, I think.
This episode is sponsored by Capital Area Planning Group. Capital Area Planning Group is a fiduciary wealth management firm that specializes in helping high net worth individuals and families navigate the complexities that come along with managing concentrated stock options, multiple income streams, and an ever-changing tax code. While our team of certified financial planners are well-versed in all things personal finance, our areas of expertise include equity compensation, estate planning, and multi-year tax planning. At Capital Area Planning Group, we believe in pricing transparency. That's why our fees are posted on our website, right alongside the various services we perform on behalf of our clients throughout the year. If you're tired of receiving the same cookie-cutter advice from your financial advisor, then don't wait. Reach out to us today at capgllc.com to experience a better approach to wealth management. Again, that web address is www.capgllc.com.
You've got thoughts on Robinhood. Let's do for our life advice corner and no investment stuff corner. Let's go to Robinhood. I know you have thoughts on this. They've launched a private markets fund for retail investors. This is for highly valued private companies. Databricks Ramp is in there. They have Aura, which makes the Aura Ring, a company that's developing supersonic jets. And what is interesting about this, given the time, is that Robinhood priced the IPO at $25 per share. They raised less money than it initially targeted. And also, this fund is trading at less than net asset value. 6 months ago, a year ago, 2021, there's no chance this fund is trading at less than net asset value, which is the accounted value of the businesses in the portfolio.
They could not have had worse timing. Like, not at all. Like, for the last month, 2 months, every single day on CNBC, Bloomberg, Yahoo Finance, like everywhere you look for money news, it's all about how private credit is going to ruin the markets. And if you've got money in any of these private credit funds, you better hit the redeem button as soon as you possibly can, because it's all going to hell in a handbasket. And right as that is the thing dominating the headlines, they are timing up this launch. Now, I'm sure Vlad and crew have been working on this thing for like a year now, and it was a great idea in 2025 or 2024 when they cooked it up, to your point. But it just takes that long to get past all the regulatory requirements to get something launched. And I bet you that's the reason that the timing is so terrible on this. Had they been able to put it out in 25 when they probably wanted to, it would have landed to acclaim. But now it's like, I don't want that. Ew.
But a couple of important distinctions. Number one, this is equity in private companies. It's not private.
It's a venture fund. I get it.
It's not private credit, which is so. But I think that's different.
Those things are all being conflated together. So you have the BDCs, the business development companies or corporations, whatever the C stands for, that are cobbling together loans and investments in things like data centers on behalf of a company like Facebook, who wants to build a 1 gigawatt data center in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in the center of the country. And so they partner with a bank or two, bring together however many billions of dollars they need to make that happen and form a business development company. Then you also have the alternative asset managers like Blackstone and Ares and Blue Owl and whoever else that are seeing the shares of their individual companies trade down, 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 down every single day, even though the BDCs that they represent may not even be, 1-2% of the overall portfolio mix of how they generate revenue and all the different ways that they have to create distributable income to share with their shareholders. But they're being conflated together. Then you also have private funds of things like venture capital, like this is, that have nothing to do with private credit, like you were saying, but because it's a private investment and they're using the word private investment when they talk about it, retail investors are saying, oh, I already got screwed on that thing from Blackstone. I already got screwed on that Blue Owl thing. I'm not touching this. And that's where the timing of it is just terrible.
So as an investor, I kind of like that. I looked at this and I'm like, does this belong in the cybersecurity basket that we've been talking about, where, investors are conflating stories that maybe they shouldn't conflate. And this is a bucket of, and the fees are pretty high. I think it's around you're paying for access to these private companies, but these are mature. In a lot of cases, these are fairly mature companies that have done pretty well. So I'm wondering, does that belong in the, speculative bucket of my investments? I
don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think this is crap.
I think it's crap.
I think so. My issue with all of this, I'm going to paint with a very broad brush, but I don't like fund of funds kind of arrangements. Okay. Meaning I've got a mutual fund, I've got an ETF that basically owns 20, 30, 50, 100 different individual investments inside of a wrapper. And then I overlay on top of that another fund that owns 10, 20, 30, 40 mutual fund or ETF type structures. And so that's what I'm referring to as a fund of funds. So now I've got a management fee inside of the initial fund. So in this case, the venture capital fund that I'm using to invest in these companies charges a 2 and 20 structure on all the different private placements that they've made on my behalf. Then the special purpose vehicle on top of it charges its own management fee or charges its own expense ratio or whatever. And I don't know what I actually own underneath the surface in a lot of instances because it's a fund of funds. I know I have a hefty fee to pay. I've got a 3, 4, 5% in some cases management fee once it all gets cobbled together. But I don't actually know how much of the underlying investments I actually own. I don't know which of the underlying investments I actually own. I don't know who are the other investors. In some cases, I've got to actually put up the money to get into the SPV before they go and buy the investments that form, the holdings inside of it. So I don't like the structure. Like if I want access to private investments in the venture space, I either need to be an angel investor, meaning I can cut checks small enough in my playground that, they're not going to kill me personally as an investor, sure, or I want to get in on the initial fund of a company like Andreessen or Sequoia or Greylock or whoever that is. And however I have to get access to that particular fund so that they can go seed these venture companies that they're going to invest in, that's the cleaner way to me to get there.
So I don't know if I might be wrong here. I don't know if it's a fund of fund because these are direct investments in 8 private companies. The thing that I will say that drew my attention is that they're advertising that the net expense ratio is about 2.1%, but that's until August because we're temporarily waiving part of the management fee. Then it goes above 3%. So that's really, if you're playing in publicly traded space, that's really expensive.
That's the front side of the 2 and 20.
Yeah.
There's also once we have success, if our high water mark is 10%, for example, we then get 20% of whatever the return is above and beyond that 10% number that we agreed to in the prospectus that we sent you to e-sign that you didn't read. So not only am I charging you 300 basis points on the front end for my management fees, I'm also capping your return at a certain point, or at least sharing in however much that is above our high water mark. So you're getting hit a bunch of different directions for fees on top of this thing. And in a lot of cases, you'd come out better off just buying in the public markets.
Yeah. Speaking of investing in private companies, there's also this Bloomberg article on SPVs, which is how some private companies are being sold to investors. And this is interesting because it's, allegedly you're investing in a private company through an intermediary that owns shares in the private company. But now there's some argument where people aren't necessarily sure if that private company actually owns a stake in the company that you're trying to buy shares in.
What I was just saying, like that's the danger, is that in these kinds of things that are being created to give retail investors access to the private markets, they're being done with a bunch of different conduits. And so there's no direct ownership in a lot of cases. And so you don't actually know how much of the thing you own, or if you own a proxy for that thing.
Yeah, it goes back to your return on effort idea. Like maybe, and I think this is important too. If you're getting in on a lot of these superstar private companies that are trying to IPO close to $1 billion, it's much harder to double your money from there. Like you are a triple unicorn, right? Because you've gone from 1 billion to 100 billion to a trillion. So that's an extraordinarily rare home run hit, and I think it's hard. It's much harder to go. If you're going into a private company like this, you're hoping that you're taking a lot of risk to hit a few home runs. And for many of these, it seems like the home run has already been hit, and it's more difficult to invest in.
But if you waited 6 months after SpaceX IPOs, just as an example, because I think that's the most imminent one of all the blockbusters set to come out this year. If you wait 6 months for all the insiders to legally be allowed to sell shares and then you buy, you stand to do better, probably, in the public markets once it hits and all of the selling pressure that's going to happens, and just take the ride from there versus trying to get in with some backdoor version where basically you're just a ant on the back of an elephant at that point. Like size-wise, your share of the entire pie is so small that, like, again, I guess to your point, like you're not outsmarting anybody.
Yeah. I need to say this publicly so I don't do it. After looking more into the SpaceX IPO, I personally am like, I can't buy shares on this for at least until they figure out how they weight this thing in the markets. There's some weirdness going on with how it lists on the NASDAQ, where right now the NASDAQ is considering this like sort of little known proposed rule for fast entry. And one would think they're doing this to compete for big companies with the New York Stock Exchange. And one of the rules is that if SpaceX only floats, it's called the 5x multiplier for big companies. If SpaceX only floats 5% of the shares that it has available, the weighting in the index is 25%. And the concern is that if you're creating a heavier weight than shares you have available, you're going to have a bunch of index funds buying up these shares at an artificially high price.
So essentially what you're telling me is Elon Musk is getting a guaranteed floor under the $1.25 trillion valuation that he made up on his own when he decided this thing was going to go public.
It's a NASDAQ rule. It's not an Elon Musk rule that we know of. So I don't think we can credit it there. It's odd. So there's a Substack that I read. I sent it to you. It's from Keibuko, Keibuko. It's worth a read. It's extraordinarily, it's profane for people who may be bothered by that. But I think it's a really good explanation of kind of what could be happening here. And also, an unintended consequence, which is someone just owns shares in QQQ.
That's the part I'm most concerned about.
Yeah. So what happens if QQQ says, yeah, that's a 25% weighting and we need to buy shares at that level, even though the liquidity, even though the actual shares outstanding are significantly lower.
Especially if I'm a person who wants nothing to do with the SpaceX IPO.
Sure.
Or Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever the thing is. If I don't really want any exposure to it whatsoever, but I'm okay with it if the QQQ owns 0.08% weighting based on its size and trading and everything else, once it comes public, then I can just kind of go, all right, whatever. I don't really care about that. But if it comes out and it's immediately a top 10 holding or a Mag 7 stock, basically, because in some cases, like $1.25 trillion immediately puts it into the S&P 50. So now I'm concerned, like, do I want to be owning the index that's going to give me exposure to this thing that, to the point you were making, may or may not even be fairly valued based on how it got into the party in the first place?
And then the question I'm curious about here is, this is a rule that the NASDAQ is making.
Mm-hmm.
How do the big ETF companies feel about this? Is it something they have to abide by? Because NASDAQ can say it's 25% all day, even though it's 5% of the shares outstanding. The QQQ, for example, are they is there a contract where they have to respect the weighting of the NASDAQ, even though it's something different? Is this something where, are you waking up the gods of Vanguard and State Street and BlackRock who issue these ETFs, and they say, we see what you're trying to do and we don't like it?
By mandate, the prospectus on each one of those ETFs that you're listing says that it tracks pound for pound, dollar for dollar, the major index that it reports on the tracking sheet. So if SPX has 4% SpaceX, SPY needs to have 4% SpaceX. Like, that's just the rule of the prospectus of the ETF. You can take issue with it, but I don't know that you're going to go rewrite the entire prospectus to avoid having to do it. The thing that's curious for me, though, is if I am Elon Musk, and I keep saying him because I imagine he's like the biggest shareholder by a long shot in all of this, why wouldn't I want to distribute? Why wouldn't I want to issue more shares into the public markets than just 5%?
Because the shares you hold, you have schedules of when they can be released. And at 5%, there may be an artificially high price at which you can sell those shares because you have forced buyers on the other end.
But I could also, assuming that I am in any way being prudent about this, and I said it that way because we had the whole conversation about how hard it is to play poker with Elon Musk because he's on full tilt at all times.
He always comes up in our podcasts. Come on the show, Elon. Scott Galloway already said no. We need a star on here.
I'm thinking, why not at $1.25 trillion that I just kind of made up magically because I felt like it, like those perfectly rounded numbers? Why not take advantage and dump 20% on day one?
Sure. I don't know. This is one of those things where I wonder if investment advisors such as yourself, if NASDAQ goes through with this and it happens a bunch and the weightings get wonky for these ETFs, is that something where you look at how you're investing on behalf of clients and say, I don't know if this is working the way we thought it was working?
Yeah. So I don't own the triple Qs anyway.
Okay.
Personally or in any model portfolio that we manage on behalf of clients. We do own SPY. And I have a feeling State Street's rules are going to be a little bit different in this case because of it being one of the largest ETF issuers, to your point you were making before. I think Vanguard's rules are going to be a little bit different here. Same for BlackRock and whoever else. But with that said, I do think it's really important for investors to always be looking under the hood of what the thematic ETF that they're in actually owns, because there is a case where maybe you own something like a Global X ETF that tends to be thematic in tech related spaces, and you want to be invested in something related to robotics. And by some happenstance, 12% of the ETF now is in SpaceX. Well, that may or may not be a robotics company in your mind. And so maybe you want to be selling the thing because you're not comfortable with how much of a weighting it has in this new company. And so all that to say, you should be checking on a somewhat regular basis, maybe quarterly when they do these scheduled rebalancings that most ETFs have. Just checking to see what are the biggest weightings that are going to drive this thing up or down, and whether you're comfortable with what those holdings actually are, because that tends to catch people off guard quite a bit.
Quickly, is there anywhere people can read more of your thoughts on selecting ETFs now that there's more ETFs in the market than individual stocks?
I appreciate that setup, sir. I actually just published on this
wow.
on the Malcolm on Money blog, I think Friday.
All right, there's the plug. Let's talk about this Live Nation settlement, because this one is interesting to me.
Yeah.
This lawsuit broke out during the 2020 or 2022 Taylor Swift Eras tour crash.
She's always ruining things for the music fat cats.
Well, no, she didn't. This turned out just fine for Live Nation. This is probably bad for the consumer when the stock that is the defendant in the antitrust suit. Did I say that right? Defendant? Anyway, the antitrust suit is against Live Nation. When the settlement is announced, their stock goes up. So that's a pretty good proxy to see how consumers fared in this. The original case was to break up the companies, Live Nation and Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster does the ticketing. Live Nation does a lot of the artist management, live event space, amphitheater, concert halls. They own those spaces. And the idea was, hey, you kind of have a vertically integrated monopoly here. It's harder for competitors to come in, and we're going to try to break up your company. And it had momentum. I think it had popular support. But instead, the temporary settlement that has been offered is a 15% fee cap on tickets. And this seems good on the surface. I was looking at Gorillas in Denver. I thought it would be fun to see them. And I'm looking at nosebleed seats that are close to $140, which makes me less interested. And then I also noticed that it is a 36% service charge. And no, that does not include tax. So 15% fee cap for service fees. They have to divest from at least 13 amphitheaters. And they have a fine of $280 million. Instead of a breakup, they got they got a speeding ticket.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. I want to say I want to go through these one by one to break down kind of what's going on. There were lobbyists that seem to have pushed this settlement through a little bit faster. I don't know if the 15% fee cap actually helps ticket buyers. Because a lot of service fees, it's not directly going to Ticketmaster, it's also going to the venue. So it's not automatic that lowering the fee automatically makes concert tickets cheaper. They may just increase the face value. We're just moving around percentages. And I think if Ticketmaster were really just bringing in, if they lost about half of the income they had coming in, I think their stock price would have dropped a little bit more than gone up.
Well, this isn't what was promised anyway, right? In the Joe Biden era of we're going to get rid of junk fees is the way that it was explained. I just stayed at a hotel in Miami, Florida that had 8 to 10 additional line items below room rate, taxes.
Were you at Future Proof?
I was, yeah.
How was it?
It was awesome. Always good to be in my favorite city, having 15 random conversations with advisors each day out in 80-degree weather and shorts. That's the way I'd like to live my life most of the time.
Yeah. Okay. Your thoughts on hotel service fees?
But so I'm looking at the bill and there's a 90-cent charge for this thing. There's a $1.20 charge for this thing. There's a food fee, even though I didn't buy any food from the hotel. There's all these different things. And literally my reaction was, so much for getting rid of junk fees. This looks like more junk.
It is, for travelers who come to the United States, it's something that's incredibly annoying. It does not help our economy when you do that. It's sort of the reverse. It's the reverse of the Costco hot dog, where you walk out of Costco and you don't think about the $300 you just spent on groceries. You think about what a great deal you got on the $1.50 hot dog. This is maybe someone spent thousands of dollars on a hotel room stay. And they're annoyed that they look at it and they go, you charged me $20 for this food service fee, even though I didn't order anything. And that's the thing that sticks in their brain.
I feel like you're always trying to take me back to Costco, but
Costco, you're always trying to take me back to Elon Musk. We've had too much friendliness on this show. We need to debate. Anyway, with this story is not over. Allegedly, a lot of U.S. states attorneys general have not agreed to the settlement. which I think is an important note. And now there's discovery coming out where there's these ghouls that are bragging about charging people $50 to $60 to park in the grass, basically saying like, ha ha ha, look at how much money we can extract from these people. So I wonder if this is one of those things where it's a proposed settlement. It's not a done deal. I don't know. I don't know
what you can do about the gouging to charge me to park in the grass, though.
Yeah.
Like that that person owns that field, or at least they pretend to, and then they get a bunch of cars on it and then they close up their cardboard and run away. I've seen that before. But like that's not something you can really regulate. Ticketmaster has a lot of the power here, though, and you can actually enforce.
And this is also something where is a capitalist, in some respects, I think there shouldn't be price controls on the amount of money charged for a ticket if people are buying the tickets and going to the venue. It's unfair.
I disagree, actually.
Okay.
I think that buying up 1,000 tickets to a Taylor Swift concert or a Beyonce concert and then charging 3 or 4 times face value because you can is a problem. And it's being done on the Ticketmaster site when people go to resell those tickets.
Your Honor, you're misrepresenting my point.
Okay.
I think face value, whatever an artist and a venue wants to charge fans, I don't see how you regulate that. What I am saying is that this misses the entire problem, which is that you have bots that are going in to resell tickets back to the customer that are creating no economic value. They're just increasing the price of the thing. That's the real problem that none of this addressed. And there is a way of addressing it. Australia did it. 110% cap on reselling tickets. You can get your money back and a little bit extra, but that's it. And so the fact that it's one of those things where we're having this big argument about something over here, the real problem is somewhere else that we're not actually addressing.
But I think even if I said you, Ricky, are allowed to sell 2 tickets for as much as you can possibly sell them for, that's between you and God. But if you, Ricky Bot, want to sell 1,000 tickets at the same time at 4x, 5x, 6x, the actual face value, now we have a problem. And that's part of what I like. Allowing people to purchase large quantities of tickets is one part of the problem, but then also allowing people to also list for sale at the exact same time that large quantity of tickets is another piece of the problem. And I agree with you that not solving either one of those doesn't solve the real problem, but I still feel like it's a Ticketmaster problem.
Yeah, because they also have they benefit from the reselling market because they get their fees either way. They get their fee on the first transaction, they get their fee on the second transaction.
And they get to throw more junk fees into the total tabulation of what you have to pay.
This is why if you have control of government, you got to make moves because you never know when you're going to lose it and you're not going to be able to finish up your projects.
Well, I feel like Donald Trump promised us he was going to get rid of junk fees too. It wasn't just taxes on tips. I think it was also junk fees.
I don't remember that one. I could be wrong.
I lose track of his promises, but I remember being promised, I was going to win so much. I was going to get tired of winning. And I was going to say, that's enough, Mr. President. I can't handle it anymore. It's too much winning. And then the other thing I was promised was no more junk fees. Those 2 things I feel like I remember specifically.
Okay. Well, I'll look into it. I'm not going to Google it right now. We got a show to finish up, but I believe that that's something that may have happened. All right. I want to finish up with this story because this is a fun one. We've had some heavy topics. We've had some technical topics. Chamath of the All In podcast, Chamath Palihapitiya.
Yep.
He got in some hot water because he was like writing about this investment and then someone basically said, hey, I bought into your SPAC and I lost money. And Chamath comes back and says, yeah, but you were able to use the capital loss. So basically, why don't you thank me for that? And then the internet gets mad, unsurprisingly, saying like, you should be grateful essentially that I lost you money, that now you can offset other gains, to saying that apparently he had a conversation with the guy and it ended with him funding his two daughters' college accounts. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was an interesting way to end it. It's kind of a way of admitting guilt without admitting guilt, because there's no way he's doing that without that internet exchange happening.
I didn't see it as an admission of guilt. I saw it as I'm going to need to come back to this town square someday, and I'm going to need enough of my followers to still think I'm a decent guy for when I want to foist the next thing onto them. And so maybe it cost me 20 grand to make deposits into this guy's kids' accounts today to buy some goodwill with the viewing audience. And that's worth it to me. That's part of my media relations budget for the year anyway. So what the hell do I care?
That's fair. Yeah, it's not an admission of guilt. It's just media. I'm helping the regular investor by helping them fund their children.
I'm one of the people.
And what I would like to say, if he's listening right now, or anyone from the All In podcast, is I did not open up 529s for any of my children, my 7 children. I only opened up UTMAs so I could have a broader range of investment choices. And in doing so, the only thing I bought for them were these SPACs because I really believed in the promise of it. And now these kids have to go to community college instead of good state schools or private schools. So this is something where I may also need some help.
And then Chamath will tell you that he himself went to community college and had to walk there every day and everything else. And so your story is no sadder than his. I'm
promoting this tweet until we get attention. My 7 children are hungry because of the investment decisions I made. Anyway, that's probably a good place to end it. Anything else you want to plug or talk about?
Yeah, I just thought, I'm looking at the series of tweets too. You shared it with me and I immediately was just thinking, like, talk about tone deaf. Yeah. Like, this guy's telling you, I followed you like an idiot and you cost me my life savings. And this billionaire says, well, good for you. You've got capital losses you can use against the other gains in the other portfolio that you have. Because I'm sure you were invested in Figma at IPO time and you could use it against the gains there. Or I'm sure you were invested in Circle like me when it came public. And that's where you had some gains that you could offset against this shenanigans that went down. And it was just like so tone deaf to me that I am glad that he came back with a better response, but I'm also not convinced that like he's not going to show back up this summer with some other crap to send out into the ether for people to invest in.
My last advice for billionaires or regular people: sometimes before you post something on the internet, you might feel something in your gut, a little bit of uncertainty. I've had this feeling before when I really want to post something. And then I just get this like tingling sensation. I'm like, I don't know. But I have people that I send it to. I send the draft to and get their thoughts on it in a more private setting. And guess what? You can save yourself from funding children's college accounts that way. When you have people that you can kind of bounce ideas off of without broadcasting it to the entire world.
What if you're doing it on a podcast in real time? Like, I feel like this is where all of my tweeting happens. And once I say it, it's just kind of out. And I'm like, I guess that's how I feel.
All right. Well, if Malcolm personally owes you money, our email is thistimepod @gmail.com. You can find me on the internet. I'm Ricky Mulvey on LinkedIn. That's where I post some of my work. I'm also on Instagram now because that's classier than TikTok. TikTok is my open mic for short form video. I'm trying to post the good stuff on Instagram. You can find me there at Rick's So Slick. That is 2 S's between the K and the O. Rick's So Slick. Malcolm is Malcolm on Money. Make sure you check out his blog on ETFs. We will see you next week.
Information shared in this recording and by its guests represent the views and opinions of the guests and does not represent the views or opinions of the host. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. This content is not, nor is it intended to be, a substitute for professional financial advice. It is always recommended that you seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your personal financial situation.